The serrated blade glinted inches from her throat. But Ariana Blue wasn't fighting for her life. She was executing a plan centuries in the making. This alien warrior in a silver wedding dress let herself be captured, sold at a morbid underground auction. Why would an extraterrestrial operative willingly become a human hunter's trophy bride? The derelict Nevada facility stretched deep underground, its corridors still smelling of ozone and failed science. Project Starfall's abandoned laboratories had become a theater of cruelty, the perfect stage for those who collected living things as if they were art. Beneath humming generators and dead surveillance cameras, wealthy bidders gathered in what was once a secure observation deck, now draped in black cloth and arrogance. Lot 7 stepped forward under harsh lights, the sole surviving extraterrestrial. Men in tailored suits studied her as though assessing livestock, their eyes tracing the silver wedding dress that clung to her like a second skin. They saw a trophy, a prize to be owned, displayed, mastered. What they didn't see was the trap already set. Each bid tightened the noose around their own necks. This spectacle of degradation served a purpose far beyond their understanding. The researchers who once worked here had died trying to weaponize alien tech, their ambition outstripping their wisdom. Their failure left a void, one eagerly filled by men with money and no morality. But the silver gown Ariana wore wasn't a mark of submission. It was tactical gear, woven with fibers capable of recording every face, every transaction, every whispered confession. When the auctioneer's hammer fell, the room erupted in applause for Cole Martinez, the winning bidder. He believed he had secured the ultimate symbol of his power. In reality, he had just activated Phase 1 of an operation spanning generations. His victory was her entry point. The truth was staggering in its simplicity. Ariana's capture was no accident. It was a deliberate maneuver, the opening gambit in a strategy planned long before any of these men were born. Her people did not think in years. They thought in centuries. The descent into this darkness was never a defeat. It was the first step toward a justice so comprehensive, so absolute. It would rewrite the rules of right and wrong across worlds. She had not fallen into their hands. She had placed herself there. Cole Martinez stood watching his newest acquisition, a man convinced he represented the pinnacle of human dominance. He saw himself as North America's ultimate predator, a hunter of rare and exotic game. But the true nature of the game had shifted without his knowledge. The predator had become the prey. In a converted storage chamber deep beneath the desert, Cole staged a wedding ceremony that perverted the very concept of union. Black market associates served as witnesses, their faces hidden in shadow, while a hired officiant recited altered vows that transformed marriage into legalized capture. The silver dress Ariana wore, which Cole believed symbolized his triumph, actually served as her operational uniform, its threads woven with technology far beyond his comprehension. His voice echoed in the cavernous space as he spoke the words, "With this ring I claim," placing a titanium band on her finger that he believed would forever bind her to him. The ring contained tracking fibers, biometric sensors, and a micro-emitter designed to deliver incapacitating shocks should she attempt escape. Cole saw only possession, the final step in transforming a living being into property. He never considered that the dress and ring might serve purposes far beyond his understanding. This confidence stemmed from generations of human assumption that other species existed to be dominated, collected, studied, or owned. It was a fatal arrogance, this belief that humanity stood at the top of some cosmic hierarchy. Cole's trophy bride fantasy blinded him to the reality that some civilizations measure their strategies in centuries, not quarterly profits or hunting seasons. The wedding scene masked something far more sophisticated than mere slavery. While Cole celebrated his victory, Ariana's people were mapping his entire network through the very devices meant to control her. Every face in that underground chapel was recorded, every voice print analyzed, every security protocol documented and transmitted through quantum channels human science couldn't detect. The marriage ritual provided perfect cover for infiltration. By placing herself at the heart of Cole's operation, Ariana gained access to facilities, communications, and personnel that would have taken years to penetrate through conventional means. Cole's triumph was actually his entrapment. He had invited the instrument of his destruction directly into his inner sanctum, believing all the while that he held the power. He failed to understand that some prey chooses to be caught. Some hunters become the hunted through their own arrogance. As Cole smiled for photographs with his trophy bride, he was already falling into a trap that had been centuries in the making, set by beings who understood human psychology better than humans understood themselves. The ceremony ended with applause from his associates, none of them realizing they were celebrating the beginning of their own downfall. Military investigators arrived to find a scene of controlled chaos, a sleek, unfamiliar craft half buried in Nevada sand, its outer shell scarred but still humming with residual energy. They documented the incident as another alien vessel failure, a tragic but predictable outcome of encountering technology humanity didn't understand. The official report cited catastrophic systems failure, listing 47 researchers among the dead, their lives lost to what appeared to be unstable extraterrestrial systems. This narrative served as perfect cover, creating exactly the story Ariana's people needed humans to believe. The loss of those researchers wasn't just tragedy, it was strategic theater. Each death reinforced the perception of alien technology as dangerously unpredictable, something only the reckless or desperate would approach. Weapons developers and private collectors saw opportunity in the wreckage, never considering they were examining precisely engineered bait. The crash site became a filter, attracting exactly the kind of humans Ariana's mission targeted. Those who saw living beings as commodities to be acquired and reverse engineered. Ariana's civilization had calculated the impact coordinates with meticulous precision, ensuring the vessel would land within recovery range of specific trafficking networks. They left just enough technology intact to seem valuable. Power cells that still flickered with energy. Navigation systems that appeared functional but incomplete. Communication arrays that hinted at capabilities beyond human understanding. Every piece served dual purposes. Lure for the greedy, tracking device for the just. The real purpose behind the crash was infiltration through calculated sacrifice. While human weapons developers saw reverse engineering potential, they were actually handling beacons that would later transmit their locations, associations, and security protocols. The tragedy that claimed human lives functioned as meticulous insertion protocol, a door deliberately left unlocked for Ariana to enter Earth's darkest networks without raising suspicion. Cole never saw the truth, that the crash wasn't accident, but invitation. His entire operation, from recovery to auction to possession, unfolded exactly as Ariana's people had modeled centuries earlier. They understood human nature with terrifying clarity, the ambition that would drive men to weaponize what they couldn't comprehend, the greed that would make them overlook inconsistencies in the narrative. Every fragment of technology served as both temptation and trap. The power cells that attracted weapons developers contained quantum resonators that mapped their research facilities. The navigation systems that fascinated collectors hid transmitters that would later help coordinate global arrests. Even the vessel's structural composition, which analysts spent months studying, was designed to break down in specific patterns that would reveal traffickers' methods and priorities. The insertion worked because it appealed to human weakness. Where Ariana's people saw strategy, humans saw opportunity. Where they saw sacrifice, humans saw salvage. The crash site became ground zero for an operation that would eventually span continents, all because men like Cole believed they were exploiting misfortune rather than walking into a trap set before their grandparents were born. This wasn't contact, it was correction. A civilization that measures time in centuries doesn't make accidental crashes. They make calculated moves on a board too large for most humans to even perceive. The wreckage in the desert wasn't evidence of failure. It was the first piece of evidence in a case that would eventually bring down an entire industry built on suffering. Cole smiled as the titanium band slid onto her finger, believing he had sealed her captivity. The ring appeared to be the ultimate tracking device, and sleek, unremovable, equipped with microsensors and a shock emitter. What he couldn't see were the quantum resonators woven into its structure, operating on principles human science hadn't yet discovered. While he monitored her physical location through his handheld display, Ariana used the same device to coordinate across dimensions. The ring's true function remained invisible to Cole's technology. Its quantum resonators created communication channels that bypassed all human security systems, transmitting data through folded spacetime rather than conventional frequencies. Each time Cole checked her location, he activated the very system that would unravel his operation. The tracking pulses he received weren't passive signals. They were curated data packets Ariana selected and encoded. She turned his hunting tactics against him through elegant reversal. His need for control became her weapon. The confinement he imposed provided perfect cover for interdimensional communication. While he believed he monitored a captive, she orchestrated a global operation from the palm of his hand. The hunter became the hunted through his own trophy system, never realizing the device meant to ensure obedience actually guaranteed his defeat. Human technology could monitor movement, track biometrics, deliver punishment, but alien physics could manipulate reality itself. The ring functioned as both recorder and transmitter, gathering evidence while coordinating the takedown. It harvested voice prints, mapped facilities, identified associates, all while appearing to be simple restraint technology. Cole's confidence in his systems proved his greatest vulnerability. He trusted the data on his screens, the blinking lights that showed her location, the biometric readouts that confirmed her vital signs. He never considered she might control what information he received. Each status update, each heartbeat rhythm, each location ping, all served her strategy while reinforcing his illusion of control. The ring's energy signature masked itself as primitive technology while performing complex operations across multiple dimensions. Its silver surface reflected human vanity while hiding alien intelligence. Designed to be mistaken for jewelry by species obsessed with adornment, it became the perfect tool for psychological warfare. Every time Cole glanced at the ring on her finger, he saw his triumph. She saw his surveillance device. The ultimate humiliation remained hidden from him until the final moments. His symbol of ownership was actually his own monitoring system, turned against him. The very technology he relied on to maintain power became the instrument of his downfall. Human prisons required bars, locks, guards. Alien technology could turn prisons into platforms, captivity into advantage, submission into strategy. While Cole slept, the ring continued its work, transmitting data, receiving instructions, coordinating with allies across continents and dimensions. It never required charging, never showed suspicious activity, never triggered security alerts. It operated on physics that didn't register on human scanners, communicating through quantum entanglement rather than detectable signals. The device exemplified the fundamental difference in their approaches. Human technology sought to dominate through force and control. Alien technology worked through integration and subtlety. One created obvious power structures, the other worked within them, transforming constraints into opportunities. The hunter believed he held the leash. The prey held the other end of a communications network spanning realities. Cole Martinez operated on human time, hours, days, the immediate satisfaction of dominance. His approach relied on brute force, immediate control, the visible submission of his acquisitions. He measured success in tangible moments, a locked door, a tracking signal, a flinch of fear. This temporal limitation became his fundamental weakness when facing a civilization that measured strategy in centuries. Ariana's combat style revealed physiological advantages that defied human understanding. When she appeared to struggle against restraints, her movements weren't desperate. They were precise calibrations, testing tensile strength, mapping pressure points, cataloging guard reactions. The cracked ribs from what seemed like brutal enforcement were actually calculated sacrifices, trading temporary discomfort for intelligence about human medical capabilities and pain thresholds. Her elbow strikes against rebar supports. Her knee attacks during transport. Each movement served dual purposes. They appeared as desperate resistance while actually gathering data on human response times, security protocols, and equipment durability. The alien endurance operating on different biological clocks allowed her to sustain injuries that would incapacitate humans, recovering faster while appearing weakened. Hidden throughout her captivity was no concealed weapon or secret device. The advanced technology was her temporal perception itself, the ability to see consequences unfolding across generations rather than moments. Her people had mapped thousands of possible scenarios long before Cole's grandparents were born, preparing responses for situations that wouldn't occur for centuries. Every apparent reaction was actually pre-planned contingency. When Cole tightened restraints, She responded not to the immediate pain but to psychological profiles compiled over generations of observing human behavior. When guards changed shifts, she noted patterns that aligned with predictive models dating back 300 years. Her civilization had studied human conflict, colonization, and exploitation across millennia, developing strategies that accounted for cultural shifts and technological advancement. Cole's arrogance stemmed from seeing only the immediate board, the captured alien, the secured facility, the orbiting satellites. Ariana saw the entire game across dimensions, her perception encompassing past, present, and potential futures simultaneously. Human violence operated in momentary explosions of force. Alien strategy unfolded like slow geological processes, inevitable, patient, absolute. This temporal advantage manifested in subtle ways. She could anticipate guard rotations not through observation, but through understanding institutional patterns that repeated across human organizations. She predicted interrogation techniques not because she'd studied modern methods, but because she understood the fundamental psychology behind coercion across species. Her people had witnessed countless civilizations rise and fall, recognizing universal patterns of power and corruption. The three moves ahead mindset wasn't metaphor, but physiological reality. Her neural processing operated on quantum principles that allowed parallel consideration of multiple timelines. While humans experience time linearly, she perceived it as landscape, navigable, observable, predictable. This explained her calm during moments of apparent crisis. What seemed like imminent danger to Cole represented calculated probability to her. Human strategies relied on surprise and momentum. Her approach utilized inevitability and precision. They sought immediate victory. She pursued absolute resolution. This difference in temporal perception made her actions often misinterpreted as luck or instinct. When they represented the culmination of centuries of preparation, the hunter believed he controlled the game. The prey understood the game extended beyond his lifespan, his civilization, his very concept of time. This fundamental mismatch in perception ensured Cole never truly grasped the nature of his opponent. He saw a captive being restrained by his technology. She saw a temporary containment in an operation spanning generations. His confidence grew from visible control. Her certainty came from understanding how this moment fit into patterns observed across star systems and centuries. The confrontation wasn't between hunter and prey, but between different ways of existing in time itself. Deep within the criminal networks that Ariana infiltrated, pockets of resistance operated in silence. Jake, Sophia, and Mia represented a fracture in human morality. Technicians, engineers, and former law enforcement who refused to accept the trafficking of sentient beings. Their operation ran from a converted shipping container buried under a scrapyard, equipment humming with modifications that barely contained the energy they channeled. These human allies had waited decades for confirmation that interspecies cooperation was possible. Their modified technology, rigged servers, repurposed satellite dishes, quantum entanglement detectors built from stolen lab equipment, interfaced with dimensional systems they understood only through trial and dangerous error. They knew enough to recognize Ariana's signals when they began pulsing through Cole's tracking network, but not enough to comprehend the full scope of what they facilitated. When Ariana stated she had learned quite a bit about human psychology, she signaled something deeper than observation. It was integration, the recognition that humanity contained both the disease and the cure. Her alliance with Jake's team proved compassion could transcend species boundaries. They became translators, bridging crude human technology with sophisticated alien physics, creating a conduit for justice across realities. The resistance cell's equipment shouldn't have worked. Their quantum receivers were built from salvaged military hardware and theoretical papers downloaded from forbidden servers. Sophia's interface protocols used coding languages never intended for multidimensional communication. Mia's security systems patched together firewalls and signal scramblers that barely contained the energy flowing through them. Yet somehow, through determination and desperation, their jury-rigged technology held. Jake coordinated the human side of operations, his voice calm through crackling headsets as he interpreted Ariana's dimensional transmissions into actionable intelligence. He understood enough physics to know their work defied conventional science, but not enough to question why their makeshift systems somehow functioned. The team operated on faith that their cause was just, Faith that the being reaching across dimensions was ally rather than threat. Faith that humanity's better nature could overcome its worst. Their modified technology became the physical manifestation of this bridge between species. Sophia's servers translated alien data patterns into human-readable intelligence. Mia's security protocols protected transmissions that moved through dimensions human science couldn't map. Jake's command decisions put their lives at risk based on information whose source they couldn't fully comprehend. They trusted the pattern, not the physics. This alliance demonstrated that humanity's best could join with alien intelligence to confront humanity's worst. Where Cole's network saw beings as property to be collected, Jake's team saw partners to be protected. Their cooperation wasn't about technology exchange or strategic advantage. It was about moral alignment, the recognition that some truths transcended species, that justice wasn't a human concept but a universal imperative. The resistant cell's existence gave lie to the notion that Earth was entirely corrupt. While traffickers built empires on suffering, these humans built networks of salvation using stolen moments and scavenged parts. They proved that compassion could flourish even in darkness, that morality could survive even when institutional systems failed. Their operation stood as evidence that humanity contained the capacity for its own redemption, if only given the right catalyst. Ariana's transmission protocols found resonance in their crude receivers not because the technology was compatible, but because their intentions aligned. The quantum frequencies responded to moral certainty as much as technical precision. This unexpected compatibility suggested that physics itself might have ethical dimensions humanity had yet to discover, that justice might be woven into the fabric of reality in ways beyond human understanding. The alliance worked because both sides embraced what they didn't understand. Ariana trusted humans she had never met. The resistance team trusted signals they couldn't explain. Their cooperation became a testament to the possibility that species could meet not through formal diplomacy or controlled first contact, but through shared commitment to protecting life. They wrote a new chapter in interspecies relations using scavenged parts and desperate hope, proving that sometimes the most advanced diplomacy required no translation. Dust plumes rose behind the convoy as Cole's men pursued what they believed was a fleeing captive across the Nevada desert. Their SUVs kicked up clouds of alkaline dust, engines roaring across dry lake beds where military testing had once shaken the ground. Inside the lead vehicle, the security commander barked into his radio, coordinating the hunt with practiced efficiency. They saw only a desperate escape attempt. They never considered they were participants in orchestrated intelligence gathering. Ariana moved through the desert with purposeful precision. Each evasive maneuver served to map the trafficking network's response patterns. When she doubled back through a narrow canyon, she noted the response time of backup units. When she crossed into rocky terrain, she recorded which vehicles handled the conditions best. The chase flushed out hidden assets: helicopters from private security firms, drone operators on retainer, communication specialists who normally worked in shadow. Her three moves ahead mindset exposed the network's fundamental weakness. Every hunter followed the same pursuit protocols across continents. They relied on predictable patterns, standard vehicle formations, coded radio chatter, escalation procedures that never varied. The desert became a testing ground where Ariana confirmed her people's centuries-old psychological profiles. Human traffickers operated on assumption of superiority, never imagining their prey might be studying them. Radio traffic crackled with familiar patterns. Target moving northeast toward ridgeline, followed by Units 3 and 4 flank from the west. The phrases echoed pursuit protocols used from Siberia to Argentina. The same command spoken in different languages but identical structure. Ariana's ring recorded every transmission, mapping the global network through its standardized responses. The supposed escape revealed communication protocols that would later prove crucial. Encryption methods, frequency hopping sequences, emergency alert triggers, all became visible under stress. The network's coordinated response provided a complete organizational chart of Cole's operation. Senior commanders revealed themselves through their decision-making patterns. Junior operatives showed their training and limitations under pressure. This theatrical chase demonstrated the traffickers' greatest vulnerability. Their confidence in established procedures made them predictable. Their reliance on technology made them transparent. Their assumption of superiority made them blind to being manipulated. They chased a ghost while giving away their entire playbook. The desert landscape functioned as ideal testing ground. Its emptiness provided clear sightlines for observation. Its rugged terrain tested vehicle capabilities and driver skill. Its isolation ensured no accidental witnesses to the intelligence-gathering operation. Each dust cloud, each radio transmission, each tactical adjustment contributed to the profile Ariana's people were building. Human pursuit tactics had evolved to capture frightened, disorganized prey. They were unprepared for a subject who moved with calculated purpose, who chose terrain to maximize observational opportunities, who understood pursuit psychology better than the pursuers. The security teams followed their training manuals exactly as written, never realizing their manuals had been anticipated centuries earlier. The chase continued for hours, stretching resources and patience. Fatigue set in among the pursuers, revealing how they handled exhaustion, how command structures weakened under stress, what shortcuts they took when tired. Ariana noted everything: the sloppy radio procedure after 3 hours, the reduced vehicle spacing when drivers grew weary, the frustrated arguments between team members. This desert theater accomplished what years of surveillance could not. It showed the network in motion under pressure, making decisions in real time. The intelligence gathered would later enable simultaneous takedowns across 6 continents. Every mile driven, every radio transmission, every tactical decision became another thread in the noose tightening around the entire operation. They believed they were hunting. They were actually performing. Cole's confidence shattered when reality itself betrayed him. His men had her surrounded in the empty hangar, weapons trained on what they believed was a cornered alien. Emergency lighting cast long shadows across the concrete floor, the red glow illuminating faces tight with tension. They saw a single being against the wall. They never considered she might not be operating within their physical constraints. The soldier's panicked cry cut through the radio static. "Contact! Contact!" "She's not human." "Repeat, target is not human. We need immediate backup and heavy weapons." His voice broke as he finished the transmission, the unspoken profanity hanging in the air. This wasn't the controlled takedown they'd trained for. This was the collapse of everything they understood about combat physics. Ariana moved as a blue blur in the poor light. One moment she stood against the far wall. The next she was behind the lead soldier, her hand striking with surgical precision. The sound of vertebrae separating was barely audible over the shouting. She didn't fight, she dismantled. Each movement defied human kinetics, operating on principles that made weapons and armor irrelevant. Her declaration carried across the hangar without raising her voice. "I am the consequence of your actions." The words reframed everything. She wasn't a victim fighting back. She was moral retribution made manifest. Human law and conventional violence couldn't contain a threat that operated across multiple realities. Their training, their tactics, their technology, all designed for 3-dimensional combat against opponents who obeyed known physics. The predator's tools became useless against prey that could step outside space-time. Rifles aimed at empty air. Perimeter security detected nothing until she'd already passed through. Communication systems reported her in multiple locations simultaneously. They were fighting someone who manipulated reality itself. Their weapons, unable to target justice, made physical. Soldiers fired at where she'd been, the reports echoing through the vast space. Bullets sparked against concrete walls while she moved between dimensions, appearing only to strike before vanishing again. The security team's coordination broke down completely. They shouted conflicting positions, fired at shadows, tripped over each other in confusion. Their body armor protected against ballistic threats, not precision strikes that bypassed protection entirely. Cole watched from the observation deck, his face pale in the monitor glow. His entire understanding of dominance and control evaporated as he witnessed his highly trained team being systematically neutralized by something they couldn't comprehend. The tracking data on his screen showed impossible movements, locations that couldn't be reached that quickly, biometric readings that defied human physiology. The quantum revelation wasn't about technology superiority. It was about fundamental differences in how they perceived and interacted with reality. Human combat relied on physics that Ariana's people treated as suggestions rather than rules. Her movements weren't faster, they were elsewhere until they weren't. Her strikes weren't stronger, they applied force at angles human anatomy couldn't achieve. This confrontation demonstrated the ultimate limitation of human violence. It required a shared reality to be effective. When faced with an opponent who could rewrite combat physics, their weapons became useless. Their tactics became liabilities. Their confidence became blindness. The hangar that should have been a perfect containment zone became a demonstration of how small humanity's understanding of the universe truly was. The soldiers learned what Cole had failed to understand. Some prey wasn't meant to be hunted. Some consequences couldn't be contained. Their weapons couldn't target justice itself, couldn't stop retribution that moved through dimensions they couldn't perceive. The battle ended not with surrender but with realization. They had never been fighting a being. They had been fighting the inevitable result of their own choices. Jake Morrison's voice came through the headset, calm and clear. Package delivered. 3 words that activated simultaneous operations across 6 continents. In Berlin, tactical teams moved against a shipping company that fronted for transport operations. In Singapore, authorities surrounded a luxury yacht where auctions had been held for years. Johannesburg, Buenos Aires, Moscow. Each city became part of a coordinated strike that started with a signal from the Nevada desert. The auction house hadn't been the target. It served as bait to gather every major trafficker in one place: wealthy collectors, transportation specialists, security contractors, all drawn to what they believed would be another routine acquisition. They came to purchase a trophy and instead became evidence in their own prosecution. The building that hosted their grim commerce became the center of a global operation they never saw coming. Ariana's ring had been transmitting throughout her captivity. Every face, every transaction, every conversation had been recorded and sent to interdimensional allies. The device Cole believed confined her actually provided continuous intelligence gathering. Identities, locations, financial records, all collected through what appeared to be vulnerability. The rescue mission was merely the signal to spring a trap years in the making. Trafficking networks that considered themselves untouchable found their structures collapsing within hours. Safe houses were raided, financial accounts frozen, communication networks dismantled. The evidence gathered through Ariana's perceived captivity provided everything needed for simultaneous takedowns. Photographs of transactions, video recordings of meetings, electronic transfers of funds, all became evidence in multiple jurisdictions, the auction of one being triggered the destruction of an entire industry. Attendees who came to buy specimens found themselves facing arrest instead. Politicians who had accepted bribes to look the other way were confronted with their own photographed handshakes. Military contractors who provided security saw their operations exposed through their own communication logs. They came as predators and left as prisoners of their own greed. Law enforcement agencies across time zones received coordinated briefings simultaneously. The intelligence came with translation protocols, jurisdictional guidance, and evidence authentication that made prosecution possible across different legal systems. The operation demonstrated that crime networks might operate globally, but justice could coordinate across realities. The efficiency rate approached 97% because the intelligence was comprehensive and simultaneous. Targets couldn't warn each other when operations happened at the same moment across continents. Phone lines went dead as communications were cut. Escape routes were blocked before anyone realized they needed to escape. The network collapsed like a house of cards with all supports removed at once. Financial records proved particularly damaging. The traffickers had been careful with physical evidence but less cautious with money trails. Bank transfers, cryptocurrency movements, shell company registrations, all collected through Ariana's surveillance and presented in formats that national agencies could immediately use. The economic infrastructure of the trafficking network unraveled faster than its operational capabilities. Diplomatic channels buzzed with activity as governments realized the scope of what was unfolding. Countries that had tolerated certain operations found themselves facing international pressure as evidence became public. The simultaneous nature of the raids created a momentum that overcame bureaucratic resistance. Action had to be taken because action was already being taken everywhere. The auction house stood empty now, its lights still burning but its purpose extinguished. What had been a center of exploitation became a crime scene, then a symbol, then a memory. The beings who passed through there would be remembered not as trophies but as catalysts for change. Their suffering had not been in vain. It had been recorded, transmitted, and used to ensure such suffering would not continue. They came to buy living property and instead purchased their own incarceration. They sought to own something rare and beautiful, and instead became examples of justice served. The industry they built on exploitation found itself exploited. Their confidence turned against them, their secrets laid bare for all to see. The trap closed not with a whisper, but with a global chorus of slamming cell doors. Justice required a new architecture for containment. Facility 7. Alpha emerged from reinforced concrete and quantum shielding, its existence marking humanity's acknowledgement that crimes against non-human sentience demanded unprecedented accountability. Originally designed for high-value terrorist suspects, its repurposing signaled a fundamental shift in legal and moral considerations. The prison stood isolated in a classified location, its perimeter protected by technology that blurred the line between physical security and dimensional barriers. Cole Martinez's paralysis from the chest down made him the ideal first resident. His condition required specialized medical containment that the facility could provide while ensuring absolute security. He wouldn't simply be imprisoned. He would be imprisoned alongside others who shared his pathological worldview. The hunter would spend eternity surrounded by reflections of his own corruption, each inmate a testament to failed ambition and moral blindness. Agent Morrison delivered the verdict without emotion. "You're never going to see the outside of a prison cell again?" The statement carried finality beyond mere sentencing. It represented a permanent shift in interspecies law, a line drawn across jurisdictions and traditions. Emergency legislation had moved with astonishing speed, making trafficking sentient beings retroactively punishable worldwide. Politicians found motivation when confronted with evidence spanning continents and species. The facility housed those who operated under the catastrophic assumption that only human suffering mattered. War criminals who targeted alien refugees, scientists who conducted forbidden experiments, collectors who treated conscious beings as pets, all found themselves in identical cells. Their diversity of crimes shared a common thread, the belief that some forms of life were expendable. Now they would learn that no life was insignificant. Cole's fall completed the moral reversal Ariana's people had planned for centuries. The man who built trophy rooms filled with captured beings now occupied a room that would never change, never expand, never contain anything but himself and his regrets. His confinement became symbolic of the new reality. Those who sought to own others would ultimately lose ownership of themselves. Facility 7. Alpha stood as permanent monument to the truth that some prey fights back. Its very existence served as warning and proof that exploitation carried consequences spanning species and dimensions. The architects of suffering would now experience limited mobility, controlled environments, and constant monitoring, the very conditions they had imposed on others. The international operations demonstrated coordinated commitment to this new justice. Interpol teams worked alongside dimensional allies, sharing intelligence and resources across traditional boundaries. The global reach of the trafficking network necessitated global response, with arrests occurring simultaneously across time zones and legal systems. Cole's transition from hunter to prisoner represented more than personal downfall. It illustrated the collapse of an entire paradigm built on dominance and ownership. His cell, while physically secure, served psychological purpose beyond containment. It forced confrontation with the reality that his values had been wrong, his assumptions flawed, his entire worldview based on dangerous fiction. The facility's design incorporated elements that prevented not just escape, but also the exercise of power over others. Inmates could not communicate, could not organize, could not continue patterns of manipulation that had defined their previous lives. They existed in isolated contemplation of choices that brought them there. This new prison system acknowledged that some crimes required specialized understanding of both perpetrator and victim. Guards received training in interspecies psychology, learning to recognize manipulation tactics that transcended human norms. Medical staff understood physiological differences that might affect treatment and containment protocols. The establishment of Facility 7 Alpha signaled that humanity had reached a turning point. No longer would crimes against non-human sentience be ignored or minimized. The legal framework now recognized that suffering mattered regardless of biology. that exploitation was wrong regardless of species, that justice must protect all conscious beings. Cole's lifetime confinement served as permanent reminder that the age of hunting sentient beings had ended, replaced by an era of accountability that spanned worlds. Justice extended beyond planetary atmospheres and through dimensional membranes invisible to human sensors. The Council of Ariana's people monitored operations from a vantage point that treated time as landscape rather than sequence. Their observation deck showed not just Earth's present but multiple potential timelines, criminal patterns unfolding across centuries like tapestries waiting to be read. This perspective made their 97% arrest efficiency rate possible, a statistic that defied human understanding of law enforcement limitations. The Liberation Front coordinated across realities using quantum prediction algorithms that mapped criminal enterprises before they fully manifested. Human traffickers operated in linear time, planning months or years ahead at most. Their opponents perceived centuries as manageable segments, anticipating patterns before criminals conceived them. This temporal advantage enabled interventions that seemed impossibly precise to human observers. Arrests occurred before shipments moved, raids happened before meetings convened, evidence appeared before crimes were reported. Their operations demonstrated fundamental differences in strategic thinking. Human law enforcement reacted to crimes already committed. The Liberation Front prevented crimes from reaching fruition. They treated time as navigable dimension, moving through potential futures to identify and neutralize threats in their embryonic stages. This approach required patience that made human efforts appear impulsive by comparison. Where authorities saw cases to be solved, they saw patterns to be disrupted across generations. Quantum communication systems allowed coordination that transcended dimensional barriers. Messages moved through folded space-time rather than conventional channels, making interception impossible for human technology. The algorithms processed data from multiple timelines simultaneously, identifying constants in criminal behavior that remained consistent across realities. This cross-dimensional analysis revealed universal patterns of exploitation that individual planetary jurisdictions might miss. The age of hunting sentient beings ended, because hunters became the hunted across all dimensions. Traffickers who believed themselves safe in alternate realities found their operations collapsing simultaneously. The Liberation Front's reach extended wherever suffering occurred, their justice system recognizing no boundaries between worlds or timelines. Their efficiency stemmed from this omnipresent capability, the understanding that crime against consciousness was crime everywhere, regardless of dimension. Their multidimensional strategy utilized temporal perception as primary weapon. While human criminals planned escape routes through physical space, the Liberation Front monitored their movements across possible futures. Arrest teams appeared at locations before suspects decided to flee there. Evidence collection began before crimes were committed. This proactive approach made resistance futile. Opponents found themselves always reacting to actions taken before they'd made decisions. The 97% efficiency rate reflected not perfection, but comprehensive coverage. Some criminals escaped through random chance or unpredictable choices, but the system learned from these exceptions, refining algorithms to account for statistical anomalies. Each failure improved future success rates, the collective knowledge growing across generations of operatives. Human traffickers operated with limited perspective, seeing only immediate gains and local consequences. Their opponents worked with panoramic vision, understanding how each action rippled across dimensions and centuries. This fundamental mismatch in perception ensured that traditional evasion tactics proved useless. Hiding in different countries meant nothing when your pursuers could see across timelines. Changing identities offered no protection when your essential patterns remained constant across realities. The strategy demonstrated that justice could be both absolute and patient. It didn't require immediate resolution, so long as eventual accountability remained certain. This eternal perspective changed the nature of law enforcement from reactive punishment to preventive protection. Criminals might operate for years believing themselves successful, never realizing they moved toward inevitable confrontation with systems they couldn't comprehend or escape. Their success redefined what justice meant across species. It became not about punishment after harm but prevention before suffering. Not about closing cases but maintaining eternal vigilance. The Liberation Front's work would continue as long as consciousness existed anywhere. Their watch extending through dimensions humans were only beginning to suspect existed. Her people offered extraction to safer dimensions after the mission's success. A shimmering portal stood ready in the desert night, its edges rippling with energies that bent light and space. Returning home would mean comfort, recognition, the familiar rhythms of a civilization that measured time in centuries. It would also mean abandoning human allies to continue the fight alone. Earth's work was only 10% complete. The dismantled network represented merely the visible structure, not the deeper cultural sickness that allowed it to flourish. Ariana stood watching the portal, its light reflecting in eyes that had witnessed both human cruelty and human courage. She understood that justice required perpetual vigilance, not temporary intervention. The choice wasn't between safety and danger, but between completion and abandonment. Her statement carried quiet certainty. Earth is where the work is. These words signaled her commitment to the species that had produced both hunters and liberators, that contained both profound darkness and extraordinary light. The ring on her finger had mutated from shackle to symbol of partnership and protection. What Cole had designed as an instrument of control now served as communication device and badge of office. Its quantum resonators continued their work, but now channeled coordination rather than confinement. It represented the transformation possible when technology served justice instead of oppression. When symbols of ownership became emblems of alliance, Jake, Sophia, and Mia became formal allies in an interdimensional policing network. Their converted shipping container now housed equipment that blended human ingenuity with alien physics, a physical manifestation of cross-species cooperation. They represented humanity's better nature, the willingness to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves, regardless of origin or biology. Their partnership proved that compassion could bridge even dimensional divides. This operation marked the beginning of the end for interspecies trafficking by establishing that no network could operate without facing consequences across dimensions. The simultaneous takedowns demonstrated that evasion tactics that worked against human authorities would fail against opponents who could see across timelines and realities. Trafficking became ultimately unsustainable when every transaction risked exposure across multiple jurisdictions and dimensional planes. The choice to stay demonstrated that true justice wasn't about single victories but about changing systems. It required understanding that networks would adapt, that new hunters would emerge, that the work would demand constant evolution. Ariana's presence ensured that human allies wouldn't face these challenges alone, that knowledge would be shared, that strategies would be developed across species lines. Her decision reflected deep understanding of human nature. She recognized that the species capable of creating Facility 7 Alpha and the trafficking network was also capable of creating Jake's resistance cell and the new interspecies justice protocols. This complexity demanded engagement rather than withdrawal, partnership rather than observation. The work would require patience and creativity beyond what either species could muster alone. The portal closed behind her, its light dissolving into desert night. The commitment was made, the alliance solidified. What began as infiltration became permanent partnership. The fight would continue, but now with resources spanning worlds, with perspectives encompassing centuries, with determination forged in shared purpose. They would need to be smarter, more creative, more patient than ever before. Sunrise over the Nevada desert painted the sky in bands of orange and violet, the light revealing a landscape that looked unchanged, but held entirely new meaning. The dry lake beds and distant mountains now represented not just isolation but transformation. What had been hunting ground had become territory under new protection. Interdimensional communications buzzed with intelligence reports from across 6 continents. The work continued globally, a constant hum of coordination between human allies and dimensional partners. Remaining trafficking networks would adapt. They would develop new encryption, establish safer routes, create more sophisticated concealment methods. Their opponents would adapt faster, their strategies evolving across multiple timelines simultaneously. This wasn't ending. It was entering a new phase of complexity. Ariana watched the light spread across the desert, her reflection capturing the permanent shift in power dynamics. The hunters had changed. No longer wealthy collectors pursuing trophies, but cross-species teams pursuing justice. No longer individuals acting from greed, but networks operating from principle. The age of liberation began with this understanding that Protection required cooperation across biological and dimensional boundaries. Human courage had joined, with alien technology and patience to redefine what justice could achieve. The operation proved that ethical science and courageous action could protect life across realities. Every monster confronted created space for more victims to be freed. Every network dismantled made room for new alliances to form. The work would continue indefinitely, but now with resources spanning dimensions and perspectives spanning centuries. Vigilance became the new constant in a universe that had suddenly become both smaller and larger. Smaller because communication now crossed dimensional barriers effortlessly. Larger because the scope of responsibility now included beings from realities previously unknown. The desert that had witnessed so much suffering now hosted monitoring stations that blended human and alien technology, their antennas scanning frequencies beyond human perception. The quiet that settled over the landscape wasn't peace, but preparation. Teams reviewed data streams showing criminal patterns developing across continents. Analysts studied psychological profiles of new threats emerging from the shadows. The resistance cell that began in a converted shipping container now coordinated with interdimensional allies on operations spanning timelines. Their work had expanded even as their methods had refined. This new reality demanded constant evolution. Traffickers would learn from the dismantling of Cole's network. They would implement better security, recruit more cautiously, operate with greater paranoia. Their opponents would need to be smarter, more creative, more patient than ever before. The advantage lay not in technology alone, but in perspective. The ability to see patterns across generations rather than quarterly profits. The sunrise illuminated not an ending, but a beginning. The easy part was over. The dramatic takedowns, the simultaneous raids, the public arrests. Now came the meticulous work of building systems that would prevent such networks from reforming. Now came the patient education of societies that had tolerated exploitation. Now came the careful nurturing of alliances that spanned species and realities. Ariana turned from the rising sun toward the converted facility that now served as headquarters. The work waited, the communications buzzed, the patterns continued to develop. The hunters had changed, but the hunting would never stop. It would simply be conducted with different intentions by different beings for different purposes. The desert would witness many more sunrises, each revealing new challenges and new opportunities in the endless work of protection. The titanium band Cole Martinez placed on Ariana's finger represented far more than ownership. What he believed was a sophisticated tracking device functioned as a dimensional anchor, its quantum resonators operating on principles human science hadn't yet discovered. The ring's energy signature masked itself as primitive technology, while performing complex operations across multiple realities. Its silver surface reflected human vanity, while concealing alien intelligence designed to be underestimated. While monitoring her location through his handheld display, Cole was actually providing power to her communication systems. Each status check activated quantum channels that bypassed human security protocols, the energy from his own equipment fueling the very network that would dismantle his operation. The device served as both recorder and transmitter, gathering evidence while coordinating the global takedown. Every face scanned, every conversation recorded, every transaction documented became part of the case against him. Ariana's people had designed the ring to be mistaken for jewelry by species obsessed with adornment. They understood human psychology with terrifying precision, the tendency to value appearance over substance, to see decoration where there was technology, to assume superiority where there was only ignorance. The ring became the ultimate humiliation for Cole. His symbol of ownership was actually his own surveillance device. Every time he checked her location, he activated the system that would destroy him. Human technology could create prisons with bars and locks and shock emitters. Alien technology could turn prisons into platforms for liberation. The ring's crystalline matrix interfaced with Ariana's own biology, creating a connection to multidimensional networks that human science couldn't detect. While Cole believed he monitored a captive, she orchestrated an operation spanning continents from the palm of his hand. The device contained quantum resonators that, when activated, created harmonic frequencies causing space to fold and distort. This allowed Ariana to appear in multiple locations simultaneously, a capability that defied human physics and combat training. The ring functioned as both weapon and communication device, its true purpose hidden behind the appearance of simple restraint technology. Every tracking pulse Cole received was actually curated data Ariana selected for transmission. The biometric readings that showed her vital signs, the location pings that confirmed her position, all served her strategy while reinforcing his illusion of control. The hunter became the hunted through his own trophy system, never realizing the device meant to ensure obedience actually guaranteed his defeat. The ring's design represented a profound understanding of human weakness. Its elegant appearance appealed to vanity while its operation exploited arrogance. Cole's confidence in his technology became his greatest vulnerability, his trust in the data on his screens ensuring he would never question what information he received. The ultimate reversal was complete. The captor provided the power, the prison became the headquarters, the symbol of ownership became the instrument of justice. Human technology sought to dominate through visible force. Alien technology worked through integration and subtlety, transforming constraints into advantages. The ring exemplified this difference, operating undetected, using the enemy's resources, turning oppression into opportunity. It stood as testament to a civilization that understood true power didn't require visible dominance, only strategic patience. Ariana's most effective weapons operated on a psychological level that Cole Martinez never perceived. She allowed him to believe his methods were breaking her spirit through carefully measured resistance. Each apparent defeat actually reinforced his confidence, while providing valuable intelligence about his network and operational procedures. Her supposed submission was calculated to make him reveal more than he would under direct interrogation, turning his arrogance into her intelligence-gathering tool. The wedding vow ceremony provided perfect cover for scanning his biometric data and psychological profile. As Cole recited his bastardized vows, the silver dress and ring recorded his stress responses, eye movements, and vocal patterns. She learned human weakness not through academic study, but through deliberate provocation and observation. Each tightened restraint, each shouted command, each moment of controlled cruelty gave her deeper insight into how to dismantle his entire operation. Cole's increasing brutality represented measured responses to her carefully calibrated stimuli. When she appeared to struggle just enough to require additional restraints, he revealed his security protocols. When she showed calculated fear at specific threats, he demonstrated his interrogation techniques. His belief in human superiority made him blind to being manipulated across species lines. He studied prey behavior while the prey was studying hunter psychology. His trophy wasn't a wife, it was a mirror showing him his own corruption. Every arrogant assumption, every display of dominance, every moment of casual cruelty was reflected back through her controlled responses. She gave him exactly what he expected to see while gathering everything she needed to know. The psychological warfare was so subtle, he never realized he was participating in his own profiling. This approach demonstrated fundamental differences in their understanding of power. Cole believed power was about visible control and immediate submission. Ariana understood that true power operated through patience and perception. She allowed him to feel dominant while systematically mapping his weaknesses. His confidence became the vehicle for his own undoing. His certainty, the blindfold that prevented him from seeing the trap closing around him. The psychological profiling occurred in real time during every interaction. When he tightened restraints, she noted the pressure points he preferred and the tools he used. When he conducted inspections, she observed which security measures he prioritized and which he considered unnecessary. His patterns of behavior became predictable data points in her evolving strategy against his network. Cole's perception of himself as the ultimate hunter prevented him from recognizing that he was being hunted. His focus on physical dominance made him overlook the psychological warfare being waged against him. He measured success in visible submission rather than strategic advantage, in immediate control rather than long-term outcomes. This narrow perspective ensured he would never see the larger game being played. Ariana's psychological operations extended beyond Cole to his entire network. Through him, she learned how his associates thought, what motivated them, how they communicated under stress. Each piece of psychological data helped refine her approach to dismantling the larger trafficking operation. The intelligence gathered through these interactions would later prove crucial in coordinating simultaneous takedowns across continents. The ultimate psychological victory came when Cole never realized he had been manipulated. Even as his operation collapsed around him, he attributed his downfall to bad luck or superior alien technology, rather than his own psychological vulnerabilities being exploited. His inability to recognize the psychological dimension of their interaction ensured he would never understand what truly defeated him. Military reports blamed unstable extraterrestrial systems for the 47 deaths at Project Starfall. The official narrative described a tragic accident involving technology too advanced for human understanding. This story served as convenient cover for a more damning truth. Human ambition had outpaced human wisdom, with fatal consequences. The researchers died not because alien technology was dangerous, but because they attempted to weaponize systems designed for peace and communication. Project Starfall represented humanity's first major encounter with alien technology, conducted through the lens of military exploitation, rather than scientific curiosity. The facility's history of catastrophic accidents and contamination resulted from attempts to force defensive systems into offensive applications, communication arrays into targeting devices, propulsion units into weapons platforms. The researchers worked with technology whose fundamental principles they didn't comprehend, applying human assumptions to alien science with disastrous results. Ariana's people had anticipated this response generations before the crash occurred. They understood that species at humanity's technological level often viewed advanced technology through military applications first. This understanding informed their decision to sacrifice a vessel rather than risk open contact. The crash site functioned as a filter. Only those willing to reverse engineer for violent purposes would approach the wreckage, making identification of potential threats more efficient. The facility's failure created perfect cover for the trafficking network's operations. The same military contractors who had worked on Project Starfall transitioned seamlessly into exploiting biological specimens rather than technological ones. The same mindset that saw alien technology as weapons saw alien beings as commodities. The site's contamination and tragic history kept away legitimate researchers, allowing criminal operations to flourish in the isolation. Humanity's first major alien contact occurred not with scientists or diplomats, but with weapons developers and traffickers. This initial interaction established patterns that would continue for years, the viewing of extraterrestrial life through the lens of exploitation rather than understanding. The military's failed attempts to weaponize technology created a vacuum filled by those who would weaponize beings instead. The 47 deaths resulted from human choices, not alien technology. The systems they attempted to reverse engineer were designed for constructive purposes: communication across distances, sustainable energy generation, biological compatibility. Forced into military applications, these systems reacted in ways the researchers couldn't predict or control. The exotic radiation that contaminated the facility resulted from overloading power cores never intended for weapons use. Ariana's crash landing at this location was no coincidence. Her people selected Project Starfall precisely because its history would attract the right kind of human attention. Those who saw the wreckage as opportunity rather than tragedy, who approached with greed rather than caution, who valued exploitation over understanding. These were the targets her mission needed to identify and neutralize. The project's failure served as cautionary tale about the dangers of approaching advanced technology without corresponding ethical development. The researchers possessed technical skill without wisdom, capability without compassion, ambition without responsibility. Their deaths resulted from attempting to force alien science into human paradigms of conflict and domination. This history made Project Starfall the ideal location for Ariana's final confrontation. The place where human ambition had previously met its limits now hosted the culmination of her people's strategy. The facility that had witnessed human failure would now witness human accountability. The contamination that kept others away ensured their operation would proceed without interruption. The truth about Project Starfall revealed that humanity's greatest threats came not from alien technology but from human nature. The same impulses that drove weapons development drove sentient trafficking. The same mindset that saw technology as tools for domination saw beings as objects for collection. The facility stood as monument to the consequences of approaching the universe with greed rather than curiosity, with aggression rather than wonder. Facility 7. Alpha represented a single component in a revolutionary legal framework extending across dimensional boundaries. Emergency legislation passed by Congress established unprecedented legal standards to address crimes against extraterrestrial beings, with provisions made retroactive to ensure accountability for past offenses. The legal system faced fundamental challenges in prosecuting crimes against beings whose biology and perception of time differed radically from human experience. The new protocols established that consent and sentience transcended biological similarity, creating ethical boundaries that applied regardless of species origin. Ariana's testimony alone would have faced challenges in human courts designed for human plaintiffs. Her rings recordings provided evidence admissible across realities, offering documentation that transcended conventional legal standards. The data dumps included comprehensive evidence of crimes not just against Ariana, but against thousands of beings across multiple species. This evidence became the foundation for prosecutions that would have been impossible under previous legal frameworks. Retroactive legislation acknowledged that certain actions were inherently wrong even before specific laws prohibited them. This represented a significant evolution in legal philosophy, recognizing that moral wrongs existed independent of statutory definitions. Human justice systems had to expand their conceptual boundaries to accommodate perspectives and experiences beyond human limitations. The courts now considered evidence gathered through dimensional channels, testimony from non-human witnesses, and crimes committed across realities that traditional jurisdiction couldn't address. The trials became about more than punishment. They served to establish new ethical standards for multiple species interactions. Prosecutors presented evidence of suffering that transcended biological differences, demonstrating that pain and exploitation carried universal moral weight regardless of the victim's origin. Defense attorneys faced unprecedented challenges in arguing cases where the very concept of consent had to be redefined across species lines. Judges rendered decisions that would set precedents affecting beings not yet encountered by humanity. Justice became multidimensional because crime had always operated across dimensional boundaries. Trafficking networks had exploited legal gaps between realities, moving victims and operations through spaces where traditional enforcement couldn't follow. The new legal framework acknowledged that protection must extend wherever consciousness existed, regardless of dimensional location. This required cooperation between legal systems that had previously operated in isolation. The interdimensional communications network became a permanent feature of global security operations, facilitating evidence sharing and coordination across dimensional boundaries. Legal professionals received training in interspecies psychology and multidimensional jurisprudence, developing new standards for evidence collection and witness protection. The justice system evolved from planetary concern to multidimensional responsibility, acknowledging that threats to consciousness could originate from any reality. Facility 7. Alpha's prisoners represented the first cases tried under these new protocols. Their convictions established legal precedents that would guide future prosecutions across species and dimensions. The trials demonstrated that justice could adapt to encompass beings beyond human imagination, that legal systems could evolve to protect all conscious life regardless of origin. This expansion of legal protection represented one of humanity's most significant moral developments, acknowledging that rights weren't human inventions but universal principles. The Liberation Front's mission to combat interspecies trafficking became integrated into this new legal framework. Their evidence-gathering operations now followed protocols admissible across multiple legal systems, their investigations coordinated with interdimensional authorities. The work continued, but now with the weight of formal legal recognition and cross-dimensional jurisdiction. Justice had finally developed the tools to match the scope of the crimes it sought to prevent. Sunrise over the Nevada desert painted the horizon in soft gold and violet, the light spreading across dry lake beds that had witnessed both suffering and redemption. This dawn signaled more than a new day. It marked the beginning of a new era in interspecies relations. The simultaneous raids across 6 continents created diplomatic opportunities that hadn't existed before, forcing governments to confront their complicity in the trafficking networks. Nations that had previously tolerated these operations now faced intense public pressure as evidence emerged of widespread corruption and exploitation. The scale of the operation generated a global reckoning. Media coverage of the over 3,000 beings rescued from captivity sparked public outrage that transcended national boundaries. This wasn't just about illegal activities. It was about fundamental ethical questions regarding how humanity would treat other sentient beings. Governments found themselves compelled to act, establishing new legal frameworks and international cooperation protocols almost overnight. Ariana's choice to remain on Earth demonstrated that liberation wasn't about temporary rescue missions. It represented a commitment to lasting partnership and sustained justice. Her decision signaled a shift from intervention to integration, from extraction to collaboration. This wasn't about saving beings and leaving. It was about building systems that would prevent the need for saving in the first place. Human allies like Jake, Sophia and Mia found themselves part of something larger than planetary concerns. Their converted shipping container headquarters now housed technology that connected them to interdimensional networks, their work expanding to include coordination across realities. They became translators between human law enforcement and alien crime prevention systems, their role formalizing the cooperation that had developed during the operation. The interdimensional communications network became a permanent feature of global security operations. This system allowed real-time intelligence sharing and rapid response capabilities across dimensional boundaries, creating an early warning system against exploitation that spanned realities. The technology operated on principles human science couldn't fully comprehend but had learned to trust through. Demonstration Jake's liaison role between human, authorities and interspecies. Networks confirmed what many had suspected but couldn't prove. Humanity wasn't alone in the universe, and our actions were being observed and judged. This realization carried profound implications for how nations approached diplomacy, security, and ethical considerations. The work would continue indefinitely because criminal networks would adapt, but so would justice systems. The age of hunting sentient beings ended not with a treaty signing, but with a fundamental shift in understanding. The prey had allies now. Powerful, determined allies who operated across dimensions and timelines. Some prey had become hunters themselves, turning the tables on those who had exploited them. This reversal of power dynamics sent shockwaves through criminal organizations that had operated with impunity for generations. The establishment of Facility 7 Alpha and the new legal frameworks represented humanity's acknowledgement that crimes against consciousness carried universal moral weight. Retroactive legislation ensured that perpetrators would face consequences, regardless of when their crimes occurred. The justice system had evolved to protect all sentient beings, not just human ones. This new reality required constant vigilance and adaptation. The rising sun over the desert illuminated not just sand and rock, but monitoring stations humming with activity, communication arrays pointing at skies both familiar and unknown, and teams of human and interdimensional operatives working in shifts to maintain the peace they had fought to establish. The work continued because the alternative was unthinkable, a return to darkness they had collectively vowed to prevent. The most dangerous prey understands the hunter better than he understands himself. True liberation begins when the hunted decide the hunting ends, for everyone. Sometimes the greatest strength appears as vulnerability, and the ultimate victory looks like surrender. Ariana's strategic patience turned capture into infiltration, proving that justice requires dismantling entire systems, not just punishing individuals. Her people's long-term planning exposed how short-sighted aggression fails against centuries of foresight. The mission demonstrated that freedom isn't won through force alone, but through the precise application of knowledge against power. The hunted became the hunter, and the hunter became the lesson